Hi, this is Mike from Business Analytiq, and this is a short video on how to use the My Benchmark option. So My Benchmark is the original idea behind the Business Analytiq tool. It's very much the heart of the system, so it's a relatively complex topic, but I will explain it at the hands of an example. Now in this case, the example is that we're purchasing a water-based resin. We have a pretty good idea of what the cost drivers are, and we want to start benchmarking the prices we're paying against the cost drivers of our suppliers. Now the first thing we have to do is to set up a private data series for the water-based resin prices that we're paying, and I have released a separate video on how to set up my private data series, which is available online as well on YouTube. So for now I'll just go through it pretty quickly. I want to create a water-based resin. We know it's a price. In this case the price is in euros, but it can be in any currency, and we know it is per kg. So we'll add the header in. That creates the space for it, and now we will load a CSV file with the prices, and then we will save that. And this is the price of the water-based resin. Again, if you want to know how to set up your private data series, there is a separate video on the topic. And now we're able to set up a benchmark index. And when we set up my benchmark index, we're going to create one. And the first thing the system will do is say, well, what do you want to use as the baseline? In other words, which series of data do you want to use to set up a benchmark for? And in this case, we want to set it up for the water-based resin. So I typed in WB, it brings up water-based resin. We're going to call the index water-based resin versus cost drivers. And we're going to save it like that. So here we have the start of the index. Here's the baseline, which is the water-based resin, which is what we're going to compare it against. And now we're going to set up a benchmark to compare it to. The first thing is we're going to set up the index correctly. Now this topic I'll make a separate video on as well on how to set the index date. For now we'll skip over it and focus on setting up a benchmark. So the first thing we're going to do is add benchmark items. Now as it happens, I know the ingredients of this water-based resin. The biggest element is styrene. If you press a colon, you'll get all the items for styrene. In this case we're dealing with Europe. So the first ingredient is styrene Europe. And we know that about 30% of the price we're paying, the cost is styrene, so we'll load styrene into there. Now if you don't know what the cost drivers of the product are, best to do some research. There are many different sources on the internet, or the best place to start often are the technical experts in your business, ChatGPT and so on. There are many places where you can get started. In this case, I happen to know, and by the way, this is genuinely real data as well. The second thing we have to indicate is the forward option. And what that means is, if the price of styrene were to change today, how long would it be before I would notice a change in the price of the product I'm purchasing? So if the price of styrene went up by 10% today, when would I notice it in my pricing? Is it 1 month? Is it 2 months? Is it 3 months? And in this case, we'll choose 2 months lag. So it's a 2-month lag between the price of styrene and the price of the product you're paying for. And then we'll set an averaging. So averaging smooths out monthly bumps or changes in the price of the product we're buying. And I tend to just follow whatever I put for the forward option. You can smooth it out further by increasing the averaging to 3 months. But if you're setting prices on a monthly basis with your suppliers, this should definitely be 1. So we'll save that, and we'll see this one has been added into the list now. Now we happen to know, or I happen to know, that the second key ingredient of this product is EHA, again for Europe, and in this case we will use 25% as the cost share of the price of the final product. And in this case the time lag is slightly longer. There's a 3-month lag between the price of ethyl hexanol changing and the price of the product we're purchasing changing. And we'll average it over 3 months. And finally we will add a third product, in this case some acetic acid. The colon, we can see what else, and we'll use Europe again. In this case it's a slightly lower quantity. It is 10%, and the forward option again is 3 months, and we'll average it over 3 as well. So in doing that, we have set up the first draft of the cost driver benchmark we're going to use. Now, in setting up a cost driver benchmark, it's effectively a fine-tuning process. You're better off starting relatively simple and get more sophisticated as you go. For example, if you happen to know a large part of the cost base here is electricity, you could add electricity into it. But you're better off starting maybe just with styrene, keeping it relatively simple and seeing what kind of correlations you get. So the system here is indicating that there's a relatively strong correlation between the cost drivers and the water-based resin. Of course, that's why I've chosen it as an example. And then there's a number of screens we can look at to understand that relationship between the prices we're paying and the cost drivers we're tracking. First of all, there's some charts on the correlation, which tell us about the correlation between the cost drivers and the resin price we're interested in. You also get an overview of the cost drivers individually, and the blue line is the weighted benchmark between them in the proportions that we've indicated, and the red line is the prices that we're paying for the water-based resin. Now, in the example I've used, the price series ends at the end of 2021, so it's not up to date, but you can see that there's therefore a long-term outlook for the water-based resin. The third chart to look at is the chart where you can see the movement of the red line are the prices that you're paying. The movements of the dark blue line are the market prices unweighted of the benchmark items. And the light blue line, which is the one that we're genuinely interested in, is the movement of the weighted benchmark prices. So it's styrene at 30%, EHA at 25%, and acetic acid at 10%. And that's the one we're most interested in. And then also we can see a cost index where the red line is the prices we're paying, and the colored lines are the sum of the cost drivers that we are indicating are suitable for our benchmarking purposes. So we can see a graphical representation of what that looks like. And finally, the absolute index is a similar chart, but you can only use it when you're really using products of the same unit of measure. So it's a chart that in general you can't use unless you're specifically working in absolute cost. And there's a data chart with the data as well, which of course you can download. Now, of course, as you get better at the tool, you can modify the index, and you can say, well, let me add electricity into this, because I know electricity is a large part of it, and you can say, well, that's another 8% of the index. And there's a 2-month lag between the prices I'm paying and the movements in the price of electricity, so I can save that index. I can play with the index month, and I'll make a separate video on this topic because this is a complicated one to understand. We'll save that, and we'll take another look at the index timeline. Now, there's one chart which is kind of an action-oriented chart, which tells you to what degree the cost drivers and the prices that you're paying are in line. And what this line is showing me, it's kind of measuring the gap between the prices I'm paying and the weighted average of the index I've indicated. And at any point in time, it will tell me what price adjustment would be needed to bring the prices I'm paying back in line with the cost driver formula that I've indicated. For example, if you look at December the 1st, 2021, you would need a 3.8% price increase to bring the cost drivers back in line with the prices of the product you're paying. And you can see that on the index timeline because there's a small gap appearing between the red line, which is the prices you're paying, and the light blue line, which is the weighted benchmark of the cost driver formula. So the system will at any point in time give you a sense of what is the cost increase or price decrease or price increase that you should expect or that you should push for in case of a price decrease if the cost driver formula that you have indicated is perfectly correct. Now, of course, at any point in time, that cost driver formula is not likely to be perfect. But that's a process of fine-tuning. As you get smarter at it, you get better at looking at cost drivers, you get better at focusing on the more important cost drivers, you get better at finding the right data for the cost drivers, and you get better at tracking it in the system. And the good news is once it is set up, you will always have a good sense of where you are in your pricing versus the cost driver index. You'll have a good sense of where the prices are likely to go in future. You get a good method to explain to other people why costs are going up and down. So it gives you a tool to communicate not only with your suppliers and negotiate better, it also gives you a good tool to explain to your bosses or to the sales team about why prices are moving up and down, and to help build a case for price increases, but also to know when you need to go to your suppliers and push for a price decrease and on what grounds. The system gets better and better the more you use it. Not so much as it's from a system point of view, but from a learning point of view of when to use this system. Now, in this case, we've set up an index on the basis of cost drivers, but you can equally set it up on direct benchmarks. In some cases, there are very good direct benchmarks you can find, either because you are buying styrene or ethanol or ethyl acetate, or in some cases there's information to be found out on the internet about price trends for the products you're paying, which may be more obscure. So it's not always about cost drivers, it is sometimes about direct benchmarks, and sometimes you can go further upstream. You can set up a benchmark based on oil or gas or long-term agricultural items to give you a longer-term outlook of where the price trend is likely to go and to what degree prices are likely to go up and down, and therefore that will give you a good tool for which to plan future prices, to get a feeling for where you need to hedge and what your risks are. So that is a summary of the benchmarking option. There is something that on sharing the data, which I will address in a separate video, on how to share one index with a non-subscribed user so that they can see it online. They can't change it, but they can see it, which is effectively by adding their email address in here, which means they can log into this system. They can see no other data except for the index that you have shared with them. Finally, maybe to address, there's a filtering option on the My Benchmarks option. So if you have a lot of indexes and you want to filter anything with WB or maybe resin, that will appear. And you can also download all your indexes or a single one. So you have to set a from date and you set a to date, and then you indicate whether you want to select all of them or maybe just the one index and to download. And that would give you not only the key indexes but also the underlying data in a download file, which you can then either use for other files or upload in Power BI or whatever you prefer to do with it. That's a very quick summary of my benchmark index, very complex topic. By all means, if you need further support, always contact us at support@businessanalytiq.com, and we'll do our best to help you maybe to set up the first one or to troubleshoot with you if you're finding it difficult to get it working the way you want. Please don't hesitate to contact us, and thank you.